So now we're actually going to start writing the lab report, and the things that you should have done before you come in to actually do the lab, or in this case to complete the lab work itself, which you're going to be doing digitally, is you want to make sure you have certain sections done ahead of time, because that sets you up and explains what you're going to be doing in the lab, what your objectives are. It helps guide your analysis, and your conclusion at the end should always refer back to the sections at the beginning. So the purpose of any lab is generally a short question, right? So what is it that we're doing? Why are we doing this lab? That's what purpose means. And you want to be pretty concise in this. This is not a big, long, detailed explanation of everything you're going to do. It's what is the objective of this lab? And in this case, the objective of the lab is to determine the thickness of aluminum foil. So I'm going to have you go back to your lab notebook. So the purpose, a short question. How can we determine the thickness of a sheet of aluminum foil? Or you could say, what is the thickness of aluminum foil? Either one of those would be acceptable. So that's it. That's the purpose. That's what we're doing. The introduction, the next section, talks about a little more detail about what's going to be involved in this lab. What are the theories that we're going to use? In this case, it's what are the relationships between different parts of the lab that are going to help us find the answer to the question. Okay, so sometimes these will be very, very detailed. If you read a journal article in a scientific journal, these introductions can be several pages long, because it's explaining the background to anyone who's reading it and who may or may not be totally familiar with all the concepts that are being used in the lab. And if there are vocabulary terms and things that you might want to identify, again, you have to keep your audience in mind. Any pre-lab questions that you have, those all are part of the introduction. So the introduction is just that. It's a setup. It's explaining sort of what you're going to see in the lab itself for the rest of the sections. So let's go back to our lab report that we're working on, and we've kind of already talked about these instructions. I'm going to delete them out. You can certainly leave them in until you're done, but just always make sure when you're done with each section you delete out the instructions. One thing I like to do, and I'll give this as a suggestion as well, is for the sections I haven't done yet, I highlight that text in red. That tells me, first of all, that I haven't finished that section yet. Second, it reminds me when I'm done, there shouldn't be anything red in my report. So it reminds me, hey, these bullet points that are in here, these are part of the instructions or the checklist. I don't want to include that in my final report, so all the red stuff is going to get taken away when I'm done. So at this point, I'm going to have you go on to the next video, which is done by another chemistry teacher, not me, but in the video he explained some of the concepts and theories that you'll be using in the lab. And then I want you to come back to your lab notebook and type up an introduction. Okay? Using your own words, using complete sentences, I want you to do your best job of explaining or summarizing what Mr. Fall, who's in the video, explains as the concepts that are going to be applied in this lab. It talks about density and volume and area and things called intensive properties. Okay, so watch the video. It's only a couple minutes long. Listen to what he says about what you're going to be doing in this lab, and then I want you to come back into your notebook, type up the introduction. Once you've done your draft introduction, then move on to the next step, which is the materials and procedure, which is going to be explained in the next video.